Zibidu ba ya be ya lo ba ya ya ya.
All right, we all ready?
We're ready.
It is 5 p.m. and I'm going to call this special meeting to order. Welcome. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this meeting is a policy work session to discuss the 2023 bond with Dr. Wade Behringer and superintendent goals, annual plan and evaluation with Dr. Larry Nyland. President Hamada is absent from this meeting. Director Margell will be joining us via phone at first. Dr. Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer, Ms. Simone Hamilton, Director of Equity and Strategic Engagement, and Dr. Nyland will be attending the meeting via Zoom. And we're going to start with roll call. I'll call each board member's name, and if they're present, they will say present. So Director Farr?
Present.
Director Margell, I think she's on the phone, maybe?
Give her a couple of
Maybe soon. Director Clark?
Present.
President Hamada is absent and excused, and of course, I am here. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Superintendent Vela for introductions and our agenda tonight.
Thank you, Vice President Ben. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to be with our board and share a pretty busy agenda, but exciting items nonetheless. I'd like to go ahead and invite Dr. Wade Behringer, our Associate Superintendent of Strategic Initiatives and Operations, to kick us off this evening. Dr. Behringer.
Good evening, Vice President Benno, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Antello. Appreciate the opportunity again tonight to be in front of you to talk about one of our priority initiatives, this one being our bond. And got great pleasure in introducing to you Lindsay Mears, who's the Vice President of Research for Strategies 360, to take us through our presentation this evening. So, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone.
Right.
I'm Lindsay Mears. I'm a Vice President at Strategies 360. I work in our research department, which means I do polls and focus groups and things like this all the time. And we were lucky enough to do a poll recently of residents here. Can you hear me okay? Everyone can hear me? Fantastic. I don't have to project as much then. So we were lucky enough to do a poll here in the district of residents, kind of all about their sentiments around the district and what they think about education. And this is one of many ways that school districts can invite community voices into the conversation. It's not the only way, of course, but I'm a pollster, so of course I think it's a pretty important one. So why don't we go ahead and go through the results, and please feel free to ask any questions. You can interrupt me as you have them, or you can wait until the end. It's up to you. Oops, there we go. So just to go over what we did here, we spoke to 363 residents in the district in late September and early October using a mixed mode methodology. That means we reached them on a combination of landline phones, on cell phones, and online via text message. And this is pretty standard in the industry today. That's how we reach as many people as possible, make it as representative as possible. And just making sure we're getting to that number. For a district of this size, it's pretty standard to get somewhere between 350 to 400 responses. So we're right on track there with other district work that we've done. And this is about right where we want to be to make sure that the results are kind of statistically valid and we can kind of review them with some level of confidence, right? Oh, and just to mention too, I'm sure there will be questions on the nature of representativeness in terms of the survey. So what we do, a little bit of behind the scenes work here. On the front end, we do what we call is sample balancing. So we use the census to kind of understand what the correct demographic proportion should be and balance the sample that way as we're doing these interviews. And then on the back end, also standard for the industry is to weight the data to reflect those demographic proportions as well. So, just for example, I'm pulling a number out of the air here, but if the district is 45% men and 55% women, we will weight the data to reflect that too. All right, so why don't we jump in, and starting kind of broad, we just want to understand some landscape perceptions of the district from people. And what we can see here is that overall, people are you're kind of satisfied with the quality of education here in the district. You got 49% who say they're satisfied. But among parents who have a child attending a Kent district school, that satisfaction is a lot higher. And that's pretty common. We'll see that the community itself, which may not have a direct touch point with the schools, will be relatively satisfied, but parents will tend to be more satisfied. That's pretty standard. We see that in a lot of our school district work. I'll direct your attention here down to the overall numbers, but also intensity too. So this is two ways we like to look at this: the overall, 49% satisfied, and the intensity of that sentiment as well. 12% who say they are very satisfied. That is not radically different from what we're seeing in other areas too. We'll talk a little bit more about the landscape and how that's been shifting for school districts recently. But I would like to see that intensity kind of sitting where it is. The intensity is higher with parents too, which you always like to see. We have done survey work for this district in the past, 3 years ago. A lot's happened in the intervening 3 years. I'm sure I don't have to tell you. So you can see that satisfaction has taken a little bit of a dip. It's not a dive, which is great. We have seen places where it's been a dive. So it's a 5-point drop. Something to think about in terms of what parents in the community are feeling right now, but not, no alarm bells are ringing, just in case anyone was starting to get nervous. It's a 5-point dip from 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, sorry. And really driving that decline in satisfaction are some key groups that we're going to be talking about a lot today. Residents of color here in Kent, women, people sort of on the west side of the district, and your older residents. Those are the people who have really seen the biggest declines in satisfaction from 3 years ago to today. And again, we have a lot of different ways to call out different results, and we try to look at it by every piece of demographic information available to us. One way to understand your community is by ideological preference. Of course, that makes sense. It's not the only way, it's not the most important thing, but it's something that matters to people, and it's something we like to look at too. And it's a way to understand your community members. So your Democratic residents are feeling a lot more satisfied, as well as your independents. And your more conservative-leaning residents are the ones who are really driving that dissatisfaction. And that's also pretty standard from what we've been seeing. It's not unique to Kent. It's something we've been seeing across the state, across the country, and it's something to keep in mind. Why are people dissatisfied, and who are they? We dig in a little bit more on specific performance metrics with the district. It's kind of a lot to look at here on the screen, but I'll sort of guide you through it. We wanted to know what it is specifically that the district is doing that people think the district is doing well. So on the very top of this list here is maintaining school buildings and facilities, including playfields and playgrounds. This is something that people see you as doing pretty well. They're kind of happy with your performance here. They're relatively happy with the way that the district is ensuring students and staff safety. We're going to talk a little bit about safety today. It's not because you're not doing well there. It's because kind of everywhere is having a greater conversation around student safety, and it's something that's really top of mind for people. So you're going to see that come through a lot in the results today. Overall performance is doing pretty well. 43% say you're doing an excellent or a good job. Providing high quality teaching, that's up in the 40s too. And you do get a lot of people here, you see this kind of gray area in the middle who say kind of fair job or unsure. This is mostly from people in the community who just don't have a lot of touch points with the district. They probably don't have a kid here. They might not be a parent at all. It's not something that's top of mind for them, and they just don't know much about it. So you just have people who are kind of unsure exactly what you are doing. So it's really more about correcting an information gap than this perception that you're not doing well in some of these areas. Among parents specifically, so that's the same information just among your parents, they really are happy with the way that you're communicating with them and with the community, keeping them informed. This is some momentum to build on. They're relatively happy, 55%, with ensuring student and staff safety, but again, safety is something they think about. It's obviously pretty important. It's really top of mind for them. It's something to kind of keep talking about. Pretty happy with the overall performance. And then you see it starts to get a little bit lower here down on the bottom. These things just aren't as important to them. It's really all about communication and safety in terms of what they think you're doing well right now. When we dig into the demographics, across the metrics, they tend to be more positive. Men, younger people, lower income, people on the east side. Democrats and independents, and people who tend to kind of be a little more cautious or a little more negative on some of these performance metrics are women, older residents, high-income residents, people on the west side, and more Republican-leaning residents. It's not a one-to-one with that satisfaction question we talked about earlier, but you can see some of those correlations with satisfaction as well. Looking at that shift from 2019, we tested these same metrics 3 years ago, so we can start to see, where are people seeing changes that are making them less satisfied. It's overall, things have kind of gone up or stayed about the same in terms of, managing taxpayer dollars wisely. It's not something people are thinking about too much, but there aren't any big downward shifts there. It actually went up a little bit, so that's nice to see. It went up a little bit too in terms of maintaining school buildings, so like that facility maintenance has gone up a little bit. Completing voter-funded projects on time, people are kind of like, there's been a shift in people saying that you're sort of staying on track with those things. The quality of the teaching, we didn't test last time, but it sits in the 40s. And I want to talk about these bottom three here. This is where you start to see shifts from 2019. It's in communicating with the community, overall performance, it's kind of linked to satisfaction as well, and with ensuring safety too. That's a big one. So if we look at this just by some of these key groups that we're talking about that drove that decline in satisfaction, namely people of color, women, people on the west side of the district, you can see again down at the bottom, communicating with the community and keeping them informed went down from 2019, overall performance went down, safety went down. So these are things that people who are really driving that lower satisfaction rate are keying in on. And again, it's not just about Kent School District, there is a larger conversation happening in districts everywhere where they're talking about satisfaction and talking about just quality of education and performance of their schools. And it's a really interesting environment right now for schools, as I'm sure you're aware. You don't need me to tell you that. So these are the types of things people are thinking about and becoming kind of, hesitant. They want to hear more about what you're doing, especially as it concerns safety. This is kind of what I've been saying. There's a crowded media environment. It's hard for schools to break through. People are kind of tired of hearing about things, not just about schools, but about everything. There's this increased political polarization that's kind of driving a lot of these narratives, which is why it's sometimes important to try and understand the way your residents think in terms of their ideological differences. And also the pandemic has frustrated many parents, I'm sure yourselves as well, and that frustration has continued to spill over into how people see their schools and their school district. It's all something that we just are continuing to deal with. In terms of funding for the district, when we ask them if the Kent School District probably needs additional funding or maybe has enough or too much, there's a really even split here. So it's interesting. You have 46% who say, yeah, the district definitely needs more funding or probably needs more funding. And I'll point you again to that intensity, that 20% who say definitely, that's great to see. And then an equal number, 46%, who say the district probably has enough or maybe even too much funding. Very few people say too much, so that's great. The intensity on that one is low. Just 8% say you have too much. But what you can see here is kind of a district divided or a district unsure that needs a little bit more information on why this funding is important, what it's going towards, how it can address the things that are priorities for them, safety, hint, hint, and just needing that touch that you're kind of already doing. From 2019, it was a big change. This shouldn't be a surprise. 72% 3 years ago said you needed more funding, 46% now. This is driven by the conversation that's been happening for the last 3 years. It's driven by these sentiments and these questions that people have right now. And it's driven a little bit by tax sensitivity, which we'll get to in a moment. Among different demographics that we've been talking about from 2019 to now, people driving that decline and the understanding of your need for more funding, residents of color, your younger residents, people on the west side, lower income, women, college educated. And some of these groups tend to be your strongest supporters, so we don't want to see declines with anyone, but especially not with your base supporters. Tax sensitivity, kind of already previewed this. This is another way we just sort of understand how people might react to something being on the ballot. Right now, we have a majority of people, 56%, including 38%, who say much too high, that taxes are just too high right now. Property taxes are too high. And this doesn't mean that they are going to be opposed necessarily to more funding for the school. It just means it's a little bit harder to get, and you want to make sure you're being really intentional about how you set those priorities up for people and how you explain, what the funding is going to be used for and what these priorities are for people, and really making sure that you are aligned with what it is that people want to see from their schools. The most tax sensitivity, it's really highest among older people, especially 65 plus. That's really not shocking. Many of them are on a fixed income, so that's something that matters to them a great deal. People without a college education, and lower income does tend to be a little bit tax sensitive, but higher income actually tends to be the most tax sensitive. So there's that. And then residents of color also tend to be more tax sensitive than not. In terms of these priorities that you should be emphasizing for people, we asked them, how much of a funding priority do you think each of the following is for Kent School District? What level of priority should this be? Safety and security really comes out on top by a wide margin. You have 60% who say safety and security upgrades should be a top or high priority for the district, and that's nearly a quarter who say it should be like the #1 top priority. Following down from that, it's, these other things are important to people. You want to make sure you're having that safety conversation as a baseline. But #2 is improving HVAC systems in schools, and we'll talk a little bit later on about how that's more important among certain demographics too. It's just another way to kind of understand what it is that people are looking for, what they would like to be hearing from you, what's the information that they really need. So we tested these 6 statements, all about why more funding is important for the district. In the next few slides, we'll have these labels here on the left, but what people saw was this full message text, not these labels, but we'll just use the labels for sake of simplicity. But if you need to come back to this slide to read any of the full text, just let me know and we can bring it on back. No surprise, I feel like I've been beating this drum for this whole time. It's all about safety and security. The top #1 message overall and across a lot of our demographics here is the safety and securities upgrades message. People want to be hearing about these upgrades. They want to be hearing about how the schools are a safe place, will continue to be a safe place, will be an even safer place in the future. That's just what people want to hear right now. It's also the #2 message, what we've called district-wide funding. I'll go back so we can read it together. All KSD students should be given the same opportunities regardless of their abilities, backgrounds, or family's income. Voter-approved funding would support every school across the district to make upgrades and improvements so that all students in our community have the opportunities, resources, and support to succeed. This is about equality, equal access to opportunities. You'll notice too that both of these messages really tend to be very student-focused and very kid-focused. Safety of the students and the staff, and the types of opportunities and resources and access that we're making sure to give to every single student. Sort of middle of the pack here are messages on keeping local dollars in the community and improving HVAC systems. So that's kind of a nitty-gritty one. Yes, Tim?
Okay, I'm still stuck on that safety and security upgrades because it is obviously what they see on the TV. As you pass 600 mass shootings for 2022, and then throw in a couple of school incidents, and obviously everybody's concern gets heightened. But the connection there is the intervening force is actually your local police, should it be a weapons incident. I mean, we have our security people in the initial step, but the bottom line is enforcement comes from yet another authority. And then they read about Seattle, and Seattle's short 1/3 of their force and no longer responds to minor crimes. And we're caught in an environment where we're talking about a bond and they're talking about safety and security. And I'm wondering if the message has to be in a slightly different box. Because I mean, we have a good relationship with our local police and the county sheriff. We have, practices that we do, review of tactics and so forth. But I'm not certain the public is aware of that. And I just wonder if that would influence the message.
No, Director Clerk, that's a good points, I think, that we can continue to think about as we continue with the bond messaging. I think this data is really sharing with us where people are now. And I think as we move forward, that's why hearing from you, our board, and others, your thoughts on these, I think, are helpful for our team as we move forward. So if you want to keep moving us forward, but I think that's a good point.
Sure. Yeah, and all of this is something just to consider in terms of what are people feeling. It's not all things they are looking only to the school district to solve, but it is a part of it, and it's something that they are thinking about, so it's something we should be thinking about too, and that's a great point.
And everyone saw the same messages, it's just basically how they interpret it is gonna be very different too, right?
That's
We
right.
can't, we don't know how they interpreted it as well. Just the message that appeared.
Safety can mean a lot of things, big and small. Middle of the pack messages here are really about, like I said, local dollars and health. This is really about upgrading those HVAC systems, and more on the bottom here, but not bad things to talk about are invest and success. So it's about, that commitment to investing in the district's buildings and facilities, to update them, and then the success of, making improvements to these learning environments and classrooms and kind of those updates that are, those regular updates that are needed. It's a compelling point. It's something people do want to hear about. It's just not rising to the top in the same way that safety and equal opportunities are. As far as demographic differences here, it tends to be the same relative ranking of what they most want to be hearing about from you and the type of information they need more of. There are some differences. Your Democratic residents, your parents, your younger residents are more receptive overall to all of this information. It's just something they're a little more open to, and parents in particular obviously are looking for this information, oftentimes proactively, so you know that already. That health message around HVAC is really popular among people on the west side, among residents of color, and among women, although these groups also appreciate the safety message and the equal opportunities message. And again, safety is really important for everyone, but especially for your lower income residents, sort of non-college, white residents as well, and for what we're going to call persuadable people, right? Those people who are not quite convinced of the need for funding in the beginning, but after hearing some of these messages, become a little bit more in favor of additional funding, or they understand that a little better.
If I may, just real quick, Vice President Benno, Director Margell is on the line. If we can lean into our mics a little bit more, she'll be able to hear us better, just FYI. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully, sorry everyone if you can't hear me, okay. So we ask about this need for additional funding 2 times, and that's because we want to do kind of a pre-post test here. First, we ask them without giving them really any information. It's how they're feeling now about the need for additional funding in the district. We saw it was at 46%. Yes, 46%, no, right? And then we give them that information. We talk about priorities. We talk about the types of information that they want to be hearing more of, and we see how that's moved. And ideally, we'd want to see that number go up, and it does. It goes from 46 up to 52%. It's a little bit of a bump. It's not huge, but that's momentum you can build on, and that's something you can see where, yes, this is the type of information they want to be hearing about. It's tough. Not going to lie about that. It's definitely a tough environment, and not just for Kent School District, but you want to be building on that momentum. You want to be hitting on these points around safety and equal opportunity and really keeping it focused on the students to try and keep that upward momentum there. If we just look at this by demographics, this is a lot of info. Please don't feel like you have to read every number. I will direct you to the points here that are really important. We see the most movement, the most kind of gettability, persuadability among men, among residents in the West, among your lower income residents. That's always great to see. Among your traditional base, where we had seen some of those drops in satisfaction from 3 years ago, the gains are a little smaller. The good news is there's no demographic here where there aren't gains after we give them more information. It's just that some of them are smaller than others. So among women, among younger residents, among your college-educated folks who tend to be stronger supporters, or at least have been in the past, the gains are a little bit smaller. So we just want to make sure we're giving them the right touch and talking about the information that they want to hear. And finally, we like to talk about the different sort of communications assets that you can use, the different channels that people are hoping to get information about the school from. Overall, people are looking for information just about their community and about the school district from the local papers, on social media, a little bit on TV and radio, but among parents specifically, they are looking first and foremost at kind of the school e-news and emails. It's all about newsletters for them. That's probably where they're going to go first to look for information. They're also going on social media. They are looking directly at the district and school websites, and they might be just having these direct conversations with the school and with principals occasionally. Among people who aren't parents, it's those local newspapers where they're going to get that news. Cut out a little bit, sorry. And then a little bit on local TV and radio, but it's more about the local papers for them. So I know I ran through that pretty quickly. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Anybody have additional questions?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to know, I was just looking at slide 15, and it goes to show that one right there. It goes to show like it is 72 to 46, right? So if we dig deeper into that 72, have you been able to do a comparison of the breakdown of who was?
Yeah, so this is, in 2019, you had a ton of support here from residents of color, from younger people, from people on the west side, and that's where the biggest declines were seen from 2019 to now. So those are the groups kind of driving this lower satisfaction.
That is kind of, because our district is more than 70% people of color. And, I mean, of course, the numbers are going to be higher, by math, right? Because you're going to survey more people of color because they're the residents of KSD. But what I'm really not able to get is that 34% decline. And maybe that is how we communicate to the public is the challenge, where we're going to be able to bring that up to the levels of 2019.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'll just direct you to this, these ratings on the specific performance metrics, that second column there, POC, people of color, where they're really seeing, where they're less happy or less informed about what the district is doing on these subjects right now is on safety. So that just continues to be a big part of the conversation.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to follow up. I mean, safety could mean, like you said, could mean a lot, right?
Yes.
And as Director Clark said, that is also part of seeing on the news all of the issues that are happening. That is, and of course, understandably, health because of the pandemic that we went through. So those are the two things that they feel that the school is not, the district is not able to address. And that's one of the things that we would like to get an idea of how to message that. Yeah.
Director Farah, if I could have Dr. Behringer just kind of briefly just address that point, but you bring up some good points on what are some circumstances or experiences that we've just been through. Right. You heard tonight, this is not just here in this district, it's across the country. However, we need to listen to the data, and you've said, like the rest of our board, we need to continue to communicate with our communities of color. And I also wanted to add, it's one thing communicating with them, it's another making sure that they understand what it is we're communicating. I think that's the other piece that I think we can continue to do the work on. So, Dr. Berenger?
Yeah, just a couple pieces to that, Director Farah. This particular slide that you brought attention to, like I see a lot of hope and potential in this slide.
Okay.
I mean, I look at 2019, I'm looking at the support that our residents of color, our younger voters,
Right.
our women, this whole list, they were very supportive or satisfied or more in line with a level of happiness.
Right.
And then between 2019 and 2022, just to Superintendent Vella's point, there's a lot that has happened racially, when you think about women.
Right.
And there's so many different things that have happened politically and just society-wise in the last 3 years that when people get a survey, even though it might be just about the Kent School District Bond Initiative,
Right.
their head and their whole being is in a space that this is how I feel right now. It might not be like directly pointed at the Kent School District for
Yeah.
any particular reason,
Right.
but because so many things have happened, in society in the last 3 years to put people in different spaces,
Right.
their responses in surveys like this say something.
Right. Yep.
So when I look at this, I don't go, oh my gosh, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. I look at this and go, you know what? There's a lot of people that support the Kent School District or have supported the Kent School District or believe in these things
Right.
and have. How do we get them back? How do we show them what we're doing right here in Kent to kind of show that your kids are safe and that you are safe and that we appreciate you and all those kinds of things, that we create this environment where they feel like they're a part of. So I see a lot of hope in this. It's discouraging when you look at it. It's like, oh my gosh, how did it do it? But then I take into consideration what happened in the last 3 years. And that's kind of what I chalk that up to. And then how are we gonna address that? How do we meet the needs of these people right here?
Right.
Just show and say, sorry for what's happened in the last 3 years. But here's what we're gonna do for you in the Kent School District. And so to kind of bring them back to that space where they feel more comfortable and confident in what we do in our district. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, communication, right? So
Absolutely.
I think it's two-way, because when we're asking them to consider approving this bond, we also have to give them historical of what we've done, right?
Yep.
So therefore, not only they know what we have done, but also what we are intending to do with the funding that is coming from the bonding. So therefore, it is going to be something that we are improving their lives. We're making sure that, that the perception they have sometimes is not reality.
Yep.
They feel that way, but that's not actual. What we have at the Kent School District is that we have SROs, we have Kent, police department, we have the sheriff. So we've done all of the necessary things, but we are going to continue to improve because it's not only that perfect system. We want to make sure that we will always keep their kids safe.
Yeah.
That is for all of us. I mean, anyone here, the kids'
Yeah.
safety is number one.
And as Vice President Beno said, safety means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Right. And when you think about the previous bond presentation in October, $120 million are right now earmarked for this bond that we're working towards for the spring of 2023. There's $120 million in safety projects. So and that safety within those projects is defined a lot of ways. Reader boards,
Right.
more communication, that's safety for some people. But it also means badge readers and different door hardware and gates and accessibility and things like that. And so all those pieces play into that. And so I think Lindsay's data that she's sharing here it resonates with us because that's exactly what our task force found, is that is a priority. Safety and security is a priority because families and students can learn more and learn better when they feel safe and comfortable in the environment that they're in. And so I think this only goes to show that we are listening to our community because we are putting our money in that area. That is a priority for us.
Thank you.
I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical. The biggest communication problem for school districts in general, very clearly, is the transition to taking your news off of your phone, since that's only going to be about the national scene. And I think that there's a direct fall off, not simply with school districts, but all local government, all forms of local government. And I'm wondering, since so many of those bodies are completely dependent upon local sources of taxation, whether we might develop some outreach program that partners with those people for messages or a methodology of messaging that might improve our contact levels within our district.
Yeah, I think, Director Clark, to your point, I think a big piece of this bond campaign is going to be very, very informational, making sure that we have all the information out there in multiple different ways at different times, and creating opportunities for people to have specific questions around taxation and taxing and all those impacts that, again, we saw on here, that there are people that feel like, oh, we already fund the district enough,
Yeah.
or I'm really concerned about taxes, they're too high. We know that. In fact, we know that when we go into any campaign, that there's a concern about taxation and the impact it has on our voting public. So I think going into this space, I think it'll be important that we are really intentional about creating space and conversations and education around the impact of this particular bond on taxes for those voters here in Kent. I think it's going to be important because not every voter understands taxation. I mean, it's just not something that everyone goes to understand. They know they get billed, they get taxes, they pay their taxes, and they're good. But they don't understand what these types of things can do to the positive or to the negative of their tax rates. So,
I have a couple of questions, specifically about the survey. On here, I can see like satisfied, dissatisfied, and I see positive versus negative. I'm just curious, when asking the survey, did you use questions like, are you satisfied with the district, or is that like an analysis of satisfied versus unsatisfied? Or dissatisfied, I guess is what it says.
Yeah, that's a great question. Kind of these labels are more for ease of use, and it might be a little small to see right here, but at the very bottom of the screen is the full text of the question, right? So we said, are you generally satisfied or dissatisfied with the quality of education children receive in Kent School District? So yeah, the questions themselves are a little wordier than I've characterized them, but just for ease of communication, we just have these simplified labels.
Okay, my other question, thank you, I appreciate that, because I am looking at it right in my face and I still don't see it very well, so I gotta blow it up.
Yeah, it's fair.
My other question is, as someone that teaches psychology with my students, we're constantly doing data analysis. And I feel, and this is me, maybe I don't know anything, but you said that a good number is, for a district our size, is 350 to 400 participants. We're a district of, I don't know how many thousands of people live in our district. And is it 50,000, 60,000? I don't remember. And like, if we look at 363, that's not even a fraction of that's a small fraction of a percent. So I'm kind of curious, is that just your company policy, or is that who responded? I'm just kind of curious about where that number came from. And
Yeah, that's a pretty standard number for a district of this size, like I mentioned. I wouldn't want to go lower than that. I wouldn't want just 300 or just 200 or something like that. And like I mentioned, we do try and make it representative in terms of matching proportionally with the census. So we're not over or underrepresenting any one group within the district. So this group of 363 that we have is like a little microcosm of the district itself, right? Obviously, if we could get every single person to respond, I would love that. It's just not the reality of the industry or of life. only getting harder, unfortunately. So we do everything we can to reach people. That's why we reach them on landlines, cell phones, text messages, online. They can take the survey in Spanish if they wish. We offer it every single way that we can, and we leave that fielding period open for as long as we can in order to collect as many people who will respond. We call back people who don't pick up the first time. So we're really trying to expand those opportunities to participate as much as possible. And this is what we tend to see for a universe of this size in terms of the response rates and how many people we can get to take a survey.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I wanted just to thank Vice President Beno for that question. I think it's important for our community to know. We've done other surveys, and we think about, so what would be that number or sweet spot, so to speak, that would be statistically significant for us to use that data to help inform us as we continue to move forward with the bond messaging. But I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think the number sometimes, if you look at it, it's like, yeah, we have over 25,000, close to 25,000 students, and then 50, 60,000 for families. So how are we using these data to make sure that informs us in a way that our community also understands how we're using the data?
I also really appreciated that at the beginning you said that we're district divided, and I was like, oh, I wrote that down. But I really am hopeful too, looking at with more information, I don't know what slide this is, 24, that with more information, people then were more receptive to the messaging. And so that to me is very hopeful. I like hearing that. Because I don't really think we're that divided. I mean, I know the data shows it, but I think that once people hear information, I think people are understanding of what our schools need, or our local schools need, especially parents and families, they know what the schools need. So I really appreciate seeing that and seeing it in front of us in data. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'd just like to clarify too, a district divided maybe was a little bit of a strong language. It's a district divided in terms of understanding the need for this funding. There is a lot of alignment too, as you pointed out. So people are very aligned on thinking about the importance of safety, like I've said, and on really keeping that focus on equal opportunities for students. It's very student-centered all the time, which you're already doing, so that's great.
Of course.
Vice President Beno, Director Margell is prepared to ask a question. If you're with Ms. Antelo's help, she can get that question to us.
Let's make it happen.
Okay, let's do it.
Director Margell.
Ms. Antello, Director Margell, if you have a question.
I've got it too, right here.
Oh, you got it.
Text it.
There you go. Look how fast that happened.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a team effort. So I thank Lindsay for, kind of bouncing back to the mic with me, and we have other team members here. So obviously our Director of Communications, Faith, is here, and Dave Buzzard and Brooke Valentine, who is our lead on our community side of the house for Citizens for Kent Schools. So this question actually will be more geared towards Faith, because it's really more directed towards like what's the district going to do. And so I'll just ask the question. Faith wants to come up and answer this, but her question is she'd like to know, what are we doing to get school point of view, not just voters' point of view?
As far as school point of view, this opinion poll included our schools. It's representative of our whole district, which includes our schools. But we haven't done anything specific as far as polling the schools. We also sent out we took it upon ourselves to send out the survey in our top 5 languages. Strategies 360 did Spanish, but we did also in our other 4 languages besides English. And we can have those results to you as well. We just didn't know if we had time to cover all of this and those results tonight, but we can email that to you as well.
Yes, please.
And then the other thing that I wanted to point out was the communications plan was also provided by Strategies 360 based on this opinion poll. So now we have a robust communications plan to support these messages. And so we'll be implementing that in the coming months. That answer your question?
And I'll just add to that piece too, is that even though we haven't publicly stated it, I have said this is a very large campaign for us. It's the largest campaign that we've ever run in the Kent School District for bond or levy. And so obviously we have to do things a little bit differently than we've done before. And so there will be lots of opportunities for engagement of our not only school staff, but students and families and things like that outside of this room. Not only through our informational campaign through the school district, but also a community campaign that will span over, basically the next 4 months.
Just out of curiosity, I know 363 is a sample size, right, of the community. You got the data from the school district, and then you could pick. I'm just curious, how did you pick that 363 out of the whole?
Who gets kind of
Yeah,
tapped,
who gets that
invited.
call? Right, who gets invited?
Yeah, that kind of gets back to that mixed mode methodology, because we're reaching people, to show you a little bit of how the sausage gets made here.
Right.
When we're procuring sample for these surveys, what we do is we go through these big lists. We get like sample lists of phone numbers. That's coming from kind of consumer sources and also from the voter file as well. So it includes voters, of course, in the survey, but it wasn't just a survey of voters. So we have voters and we have people who are just merely kind of consumers as well. So we purchase phone numbers within the district who are verified to actually live here. We go through a couple of screening questions with them to make sure they do live here, they are an adult, they are willing to take this survey, it's something they're comfortable doing. That's all kind of a part of it too, kind of the boring screening stuff. We reach people on cell phones as well, and that's by calling cell phones, and we also text people too, so they can they're either taking the survey with a live caller that they're answering these questions, or they're taking it online, which for some people is a lot easier. So we try to increase that accessibility there as well. Not every single person will be invited to participate, because not every single person is necessarily listed on all of these kind of records.
Right.
But big data, we're kind of all in more places than we think, right? So you would be surprised how large some of these lists are. I think we probably purchased, I don't know, many, many thousands of phone records to complete this survey.
And you would see the person who's Republican, who's Democrat, and who's independent, all of that.
If their information is coming from the voter file, we would have a model telling us what they might be, but we confirm that as well in a demographic series of questions to confirm household income, zip code, which we kind of match back into the district to confirm they really do live here, what their ideological leanings are, what kind of household they live in, that kind of thing. So that's self-reported.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Does Ms. Director Margell have any questions? Make sure that she's represented.
Yes.
I'll ask her once more.
Okay.
Excuse me. Before we sign off or being kind of closer to this, I would be remiss if I forgot Ben. I didn't look all the way across. So this is the group we're looking at right here, and Ben's a big part of that bond work as well, as you probably already understand and know based on his position. The other piece, if we do have a moment, because I know we have a little bit before the 6 o'clock piece, Brooke Valentine is here. And I know Brooke loves to talk, and I would love for her to just share a little bit with you about her role and her perspective of our bond campaign. So, Brooke?
Why, thank you. Hello, board members, superintendent, staff, everyone. It's so great to be here in this room. I think the first time I was in this room, Dr. Grohe was a superintendent. My kids basically grew up in this room. And so I'm glad to be back. First of all, Lindsay, great presentation. I feel like you were maybe a spider on the wall of the task force that I was a member of that represented the bond. So most of those questions probably came out of all the discussion that the community led during that task force. So I thank you for capturing that and assessing it. I'm also a data geek. Before I'd say vote yes, vote yes, vote yes, I just want to point out that when you're talking about numbers, Kent School District, like in the 2022 election, we mailed out just over the King County elections, just over 100,000 ballots, right? And then we had 13,000 yes votes, roughly 11,000 no. So that's only 23% of our voters that are responding. So then when you look at the sample size and put it in perspective with voter turnout, it kind of puts it in relation. I'll also say if you're geeky about in 16, we had the largest voter turnout ever, or in a long time, but that's because it was in November. We had 74% voter turnout. But actually, over the years, we average about 26% voter turnout. So my job in Citizens for Kent Schools is just to get out the yes vote, right? We let the district do a great job with their informational campaign, and then we just get behind it like a cheerleader and vote yes. And our committee has already been working to gather information, to build committee, to come up with our plan on how we're going to support the district. We don't argue with voters. We don't do a lot to convince them. Anything other than return your ballot with a yes vote. So I'm excited to do that and partner and use all your great information to share and educate our voters. So thank you.
Thank you.
Vote yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I wanted to just take a point of privilege, thank Brooke. I remember those days when you were bringing the kids in here, so welcome back. And she's also been very instrumental in supporting many of the other initiatives that we worked on moving into this year, so thank you. I also wanted to make sure that, I know you saw the data on, I can't remember how it was stated, Lindsay, but some of the bonds and projects that we've completed to date, and getting that out to our community, because that also lets our community know, here's how we've used your dollars and how we continue to use data to make decisions that are going to be best for our students moving forward as it relates to the environments that they're in. And so that was good piece of data that was shared in there, and I think we'll continue to use that in our messaging. So yeah, Dr. Behringer.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Vella. Again, I think there were some slides in here that are pretty telling about some of the work that we did in the bond task force. Right here, for example, safety and security, one of our major priorities. Improving HVAC systems or in just facilities in general, obviously that is a foundational purpose of this particular bond, because as we've shared before, this bond is not going out to build buildings. It's going out to make sure that we upgrade all of our buildings to a standard so that when the next bond comes around, we do recognize that we do need to build buildings.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
I can't say it enough, because every parent knows how much improvement every building in the school district needs. So, I mean, just by that itself should be enough to get that yes vote, because every parent sees that. Because when you walk in the halls of these buildings, you can really feel that the improvement that's required to make sure.
The other reminder I wanted to make sure that the bonds, definitely we have our bricks and mortar and the hard buildings. It also takes into consideration the facilities that our students are going to be in, like the exterior, right? And so, Dr. Behringer, if you talk a little bit about that, it's not just and the reason I bring that up, sometimes we think it's just the bricks and mortar. But it really is an environment that we're talking about when we take a look at the bond.
It's every square foot of every piece of property that we own in the Kent School District that has any impact on a student or a family or a community. So when you think about when families and kids drive onto campus, it's everything from the parking lot and the maneuverability and the ability to be able to park and be able to engage in activities at that school in a safe way. It's the playground, it's the inclusive playground equipment, it's the sports fields that kids are able to play on or access during PE or performing arts or athletics and activities. It's our performing arts centers. It's everything from inside to outside to ramps to whatever that may be, fencing, security measures and things like that. It's all those pieces. Because again, our schools and our buildings and our facilities, like district office as well, I mean, it's a reflection of how much we care about our kids and our schools and our community. And we're in that place right now based on enrollment that we're in a space that, yes, our bond, 2016 bond is coming to an end. We are ready for that next bond, but this bond is a little bit different than previous bonds where we're actually not going out for large schools because we don't need a new school right now. But what we do need is to bring all of our schools up to a standard that will carry us through 2, 3, 4 bond cycles to come when we will be rebuilding schools, because we know we have schools that are ready to be rebuilt at that time. But if we spend all of our bond money on building a couple new schools, then all the rest of our schools who actually need other things to be taken care of, they're going to be missing out on things, and we don't want to do that. So we want to prepare everybody for what our future bonds will bring.
I look forward to that presentation next week then, right? We're going to get a lot of information next week, right?
Yeah, so we'll be, next week during the board meeting, we'll be going through the bond presentation. One thing I want to share before we close out for this one is we're working on a very large, robust bond and levy capital measure website. So between now and when that website is built, we will have information on our current website that will show every single 2016 bond project, when it was completed, what's in progress right now, what's still being worked on, when that is scheduled to be completed. Same thing with our 2018 levy. So we're working through those things, working through that, but everything will end up on an amazing website that'll be probably, when you think about bond websites, and we've looked at a lot of them, think about North Shore. There's a couple districts that they spend a lot of time and effort and money. So there's pictures, multiple pictures of every single project, before, middle, and after. That's what we're looking at as we build into this next handful of months of creating this space, so everyone can go, oh my gosh, this is great. You know, and then obviously, much like we did with Covington Elementary when we were building Covington Elementary, we were giving updated pictures and videos, like in real time, of the progress of that particular project. So it'll be nothing like we have had before in the Kent School District, and it'll be on par with our much more affluent districts in the Puget Sound area, and so that's where we need to be. I appreciate the time this evening, and of course, if you have any questions in the next week, please let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, no other questions? We're good. Thank you, Dr. Behringer. And then I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Vela for introductions for our superintendent goal, annual plan, and evaluation with Dr. Larry Nyland.
Thank you once again, Vice President Benno. It's a pleasure to again be with you. I wanted to start today by thanking our board for their flexibility and patience and rescheduling, and the weather that we've had over the last week and a half has certainly been impacting. So moving to today was important for us. We will pick up our other work session items that we talked about earlier. But I just wanted to thank you for that. I want to go ahead and introduce Dr. Larry Nyland, who's going to kind of set our next presentation up for us. So Dr. Nyland.
All right, Board of Directors, and Vice President Bento and Superintendent Bell. Pleasure to be with you and not in person.
Dr. Nyland, I'm not sure if your microphone is up. It's a little hard to hear you. Can you kind of test that for us once again?
Okay, if I can do anything about that. That's the speaker in there. All right, so you want me, if I get close and talk about it, does that help?
We're trying to do everything on our end that we can. Yeah, if you can get closer, that certainly would make a difference.
All right, I'll talk loud. I did sit in on your Friday retreat session, good conversations around board superintendent governance, and I am glad that I'm not on front and center on Friday. And even today, you can tell that I think I'm on day 7 of COVID, so I'm feeling much, 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 much better, but still not communicating as well as I could. So this is a continuation of our journey. So if we go to the next slide.
Next slide, please.
That's a brief recap of where we've been. And so we've done the goals. We've talked about KPIs. We're going to come to board homework here in just a moment in terms of your number 1 goal that you'd like to champion. And then tonight, what we want to do is share the KPI measures and the baseline information that you had asked for. So the next slide shows in thumbnail just a little bit of the good work that the executive cabinet has been doing. So they've been doing a lot of work to align the goals with schools, with departments, with measures, with plans, with strategies, and bringing all of that together in a way that they can share that with you tonight. So I have about 5 minutes each to share each of the goals, and then there'll be a little bit of an opportunity for board questions. And then, depending on time, at the end of this segment tonight, we want to talk a little bit about what's it going to take from the board and from superintendent and executive cabinet to make these goals a reality and actually make huge differences for students. So if we go to the next slide, this is kind of the architecture. So you'll hear several times tonight, you've seen this slide many times. Green is progress, orange is outcomes, performance indicators. So each of the slides will follow that color nomenclature and give you kind of a roadmap as to green, how we're going to get there, and orange, where we want to land and which measures we want to improve. Next slide. These are the 4 goals, and so we might take a pause right here so that you have a good set going forward to say which of these goals are of most interest, or number 1 interest, for each of you. So the hope is that we have a board member for each of these 4 goals, or 2, that say, yeah, I want to be a champion for this goal. I want to learn more about this goal. I maybe will even be willing to do a little bit of extra homework on that goal. So now's the opportunity for you to weigh in. And I can't see you very well. So maybe we can just go down the list and hear from each one of you what your number 1 priority is. And then depending on how well we do at covering all of the goals, whether there's a number 2 choice that somebody would pick up to make sure that each of the goals are represented.
I mean, I guess we can start with Director Clark if you want to.
I found myself leaning towards goal 3. And that obviously is trying to match building capacity with what we're trying to do at the base level. And infrastructure being absolutely fundamental to support classroom effort and all the other things that stand behind that, everything from accessibility, the ability of staff to communicate, the ability of access to technology is just fundamental to a modern school district. And so I lean towards that.
Director Margell, which one do you lean more towards?
Well, we may have to arm wrestle for this one because goal 3 was the one that I was drawn to also, but for a different reason, really more about the program capacity and how are we really meeting the needs of our students and what does that look like? And so while I very much respect Director Clark for a different view on the same goal, definitely looking at it from a different perspective on this one. If I was to choose a second one, although I still will arm wrestle you, Tim, goal 1, graduation rate would be, it's,
Right.
it's kind of the cornerstone to me. It's fundamental.
And
That's what we
actually,
do.
my second choice was graduation.
Director Director
Instead
Farah.
of arm wrestling, we can hold hands and do it together.
Yes.
All 4 goals are amazing. I mean, there's no one that I would choose more than the other, but if I had to,
You do.
for the, capacity, I mean, to make sure that I would choose goal number 2, because sense of belonging and inclusion to me, is the one that will put all of that together. If the student doesn't feel they belong, they won't be able to graduate. No matter how many programs you have, it won't be possible. So that's when I want to, and if I had to choose another one, would be graduation. Yeah.
All right. For me, oddly enough, number 1 was important, but for different reasons, because I think a lot of times for graduation, we always look at college ready. I think a lot of times we forget and career. And being a CTE person, I'm always going to advocate for options minus university.
It says career too.
Yes. Oh, yes, right here. But I think, it's sometimes on paper, but I think in practice, we sometimes forget about trades and whatnot. And I think those are things that we need to emphasize. So for me, like a number 1 would be graduation rate, but I always want to talk about CTE because that's just me. The other one is a little selfish, is number 4. That would be my backup, because I know Director Clark and I have talked about this a lot, about like a grow your own kind of program. And there's school districts, including my own, that do amazing programs with Teacher Academy. And I think at Renton, we do paraeducator certificates where seniors take their tests when they turn 18 to get their paraeducator certificate. And there's a lot of great work that we can be doing. So selfishly, I would pick that one. And also as a piece of, I know the goal is bigger than that, but also talking about like HR practices are really important and looking at how satisfied employees are. But I think a part of that is looking at what are we doing to have people come back to our district. And I think, and doing the work to support students, I think that's really important too. So those would be my top 2 if I were to pick them.
Thank you to our 4 board members. We do have President Hamana also weighed in. So Ms. Antello, can you share her top 1, 2?
I can do that. She,
Okay, or Dr. Nyland?
yeah, she asked for number 2 as the first choice and number 4 as the second choice.
Okay.
So, sounds like we've got a pretty good mix, and it sounds like we've got everything covered. So maybe what we'll do is tabulate all of this and put 2 directors' names behind each of the goals. Love it, and you had good rationale for why you wanted to support the goal, so love it. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Vela and Executive Cabinet to present each of the goals and the benchmark, the baseline data that you had asked for, and then take a few questions to continue to move forward with this good work that's been done.
Great, thank you, Dr. Nyland, and I'll have Mr. Spencer Pan come on up, and our interim associate superintendent teaching and learning. And as he prepares, I want to just bring us back up to speed on kind of where we've been. You heard in one of our first presentations on KPIs, we talked about student voice. And one of the things we heard our board say, and I think it was you, President Beno, that liked the way that the flow looked and it was understandable. We really understood what the indicators were. We understood the work that's going to be coming when we do move to a reporting, mid-year report, and then finally an end of year, similar to we've talked about on how evaluations are done for staff. And so we heard that loud and clear. We also heard from Director Farah that we needed to know what the baseline is and where are we headed, right? You also heard from my team the work that's done, behind the scenes on progress monitoring. And so as we move ahead tonight and continue our work together over the years on continuous improvement, I'm really excited about how we're working together on specifically on some of the goals that we're championing. So I'm just real excited, and so I wanted to kind of give that over to Mr. Pan, who will first move into Goal 1, which will be championed by, I see Director Clark, Director Margell, Director Farah, and Director Beno. All four of us were in there, either first, second, third in there, so, which I'm glad to hear and see,
Absolutely.
because it is our
is.
core business. And so, Mr. Pan.
Good evening, Vice President Beno, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Santello. So as the superintendent mentioned, we responded to the format of conveying this information, and you'll see this form throughout the rest of this presentation. So for Goal 1, again, there's that upper corner that shares the frame of how we're going through these. And so we have, preparing all students to be college and career ready. And then we have the corresponding superintendent goal of supporting the whole child. So that forms that target, that frame for us. When we think about that KPI, right, that performance indicator, which really, again, is measuring around impact. One thing is around implementation fidelity, the other is around our impact. And so as an example of this, we looked at graduation rate. Right? Graduation rate itself isn't a full capture of every single thing we look at for Goal 1, but when we think about trying to distill down something into a key performance metric that would tell us, hey, are we making progress around this? This seems like a good capture of, are we doing right by students in terms of fulfilling Goal 1? Which is different from the activities that we engage in, right? So if we think about the activities we engage in, one of the activities we engage in is through school improvement plans, right? And so the implementation fidelity of those plans is what's presented to you, and I'll share that timeline that we have in the slides coming up. But this is a measure of fidelity of the strategies we're doing, which the intent is to connect those strategies then with the measure, the indicator of the key performance indicator that shows that we are moving in the larger goal. So one thing measures the impact of of this collective set of strategies that we're engaging in. The other measures, are we actually doing the strategy that we set out to accomplish? So with school improvement plans, they're a great example of this because they are by definition the capture of individualized actions at the school level for the purpose of school improvement. So if you think about that, whether they're at elementary or secondary, the intent is to ensure that students are on track so that they are ready for college or career or life. So even though it's an indirect impact to graduation rate, we know that if they're making anticipated progress, they're more likely to graduate and also be prepared for those outcomes that we seek in terms of the goals. Moving us along pretty quickly here, there was that mention around what is the actual number value for these, right? So for graduation rate, four-year cohort grad rate, for 21-22, we have 89%. And we can contrast that back with the growth we've seen over the past few years with this. Some things that feed in, because graduation rate really is that outcome, right? But we can also see things that help us, and that's why it's highlighted in this purple color here, is we track other things besides just this one key performance indicator. One of those things is, are students on track to meet graduation? And we measure this in varying ways. This 69% number really is a measure about grades. So do students have Fs, which would be a nice indicator for us to say, hey, are students trending towards credit deficiency? And do we need to do some work around that? There's some other areas as well. And then on the implementation fidelity, every single school improvement plan has goals pertaining to ELA, math, and towards graduation. So in terms of the timeline, what you'll see here is both what's above the line, right, which is again around implementation fidelity, and what's below this line, which looks at how we measure our performance indicator. So some of the activities, if you think about where we are in the school year, we've submitted a P210 report, which is really to the state around graduation, and that updates the data that we present on where our, that yearly marker of four-year cohort grad rate. The activities on the top really outline where are we in terms of the plans that we set. So you can see early in this year, that September-October timeline, learning improvement teams reviewed and approved school improvement plans. So we have all the school improvement plans completed, drafted, what we intend to do, and they've been approved. In the mid-year, they're brought to the school board, right? So there's a mid-year board presentations outlining where we are with school improvement plans. And so that's a fidelity check for us to say, are we doing the plans? How are those plans going? The intent is if we're doing things with fidelity, then we should see some progress around graduation, which really is an indicator for us around student readiness for life, career, and post-secondary outcomes. And with that, any questions?
Yes, could you just help me understand, sorry, I know this is really basic, I apologize in advance. The four-year graduation cohort, obviously we have students that come in the middle of their 4 years, they leave out. How, could you give me I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than you can give tonight, right? But how do we track that? Do we actually follow those kids and try to hunt them down in Las Vegas where they move to see if they actually graduate? Do we, once they leave our system, do they still count within that cohort? How does that work for me?
Yeah, so they track a lot of variables for that. So we actually do have, we have to report on it every year. So we do track for both the, does a student who comes in graduate within 4 years? That's really what that 4-year cohort grad rate is. We also track for 5-year, and we track for 7-year. So in the lifespan of the student's time within the district, do they graduate? The inverse of that is we also look at dropout, right? Do students leave us and never meet that graduation threshold? So we track all of these. The standard in terms of when you look at our students graduating, it's generally reported as a 4-year grad rate. So.
And may I ask, because I have to imagine that some of it's difficult, just where people move. Do we have an idea of how accurate the data is? And I assume it's not just Kent School District, this is everybody's issue, right? With people moving all over and what that looks like coming in their sophomore year or junior year, halfway through their senior year.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's as accurate as the data as it's reported, right? So it's reported in a very specific way, and it's accurate to that example. I think a lot of times when we talk about data, the question is, what are we hoping to see or read from that data, right? So I think this is an important question, because if our intent is to see kind of a broader piece of, are our students gainfully employed or otherwise, we might measure something different, right? We might look at not the 4-year, but the 5-year, or during the lifespan of their time with us up to age 21, did they graduate within the time that they can be in school with us? That is not what's reported within this data set.
Okay, thank you.
A quick question.
Yeah.
How do we determine SIP, and who decides SIP?
I will turn it over to my fabulous colleague
All
here,
right.
Randy Heath.
Good evening, Vice President Benno, Superintendent Vela, members of the board. Yeah, this is a very individualized process. There's a framework that is very consistent among all of our schools, but the work of the school is to really look at the data that they have at their school, and then to craft the goal that they have. Not only, it's a SMARTY goal, so you have your overall goal around literacy, but then you've also identified groups of students in which you need to make a bigger gain in order to decrease the achievement gap. And so that is based on the data of the students that are at their school. It is a living document. So the frame, so you look at different SIP plans and they're going to look very similar.
Right.
But the strategies that they're using is very dependent on the data that they pulled and shown for their students, the strategies that they're working to implement to address those gains, and then how they're measuring that. And so you will always see a literacy goal, you'll always see a math goal, and then you'll always have something at the elementary. A lot of times it's around attendance, because that's a big factor in staying on track. And at the high school, obviously it's around, are you up to date with your credits and on track with that?
What I wanted to know is who decides? Like, is it? When
It's
you
a
say
team.
they-
It's a
who's a member of that team?
So the administration, the teachers, there's either a parent or a student is actually on the team, or they solicited that voice in another way, because they can't always have someone on the team. Each team endeavors to have a good cross-section of staff members on that team that bring with them, like the success, usually there's success coaches on there. If there's some social emotional aspects to it, the counselors on there. So there's some consistent members, but it's always a team approach with multiple people who can ever bring the knowledge to the strategies.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking is because, sometimes, right, we're humans, so we kind of paint the glass rosy glass.
Yeah.
So therefore, I just want to make sure that when that team is being formed, it's a team that cares about the raw data,
Absolutely.
right? It just, regardless of what it says, then works on making sure that SIP is designed in a way where that is upward mobility.
Yeah, and actually, that's where our EDLEs play a really key role in this, because now that we have the structure of the 4 EDLEs in the Strand, they have a small enough group of schools that they can really, they're the ones who regularly review during regular school visits with the principal. They're pulling out the plan, they're looking at the strategies, they're making sure that they're following those strategies. They're doing the mid-year checkups. They're doing the other pieces as they're building the plan for the following year. They're the ones kind of pushing back. I will tell you that there are multiple back and forth. Yeah. And
Because, it happens, right?
Right.
I just want to make sure that, math, I'm a math favorite. So math teacher who's teaching third grade math, sees the kids in that class move from where they were to, the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So therefore, there's a trend to show from that class, say, hey, teacher so-and-so had this many students in their class, and this is what we see, right? And so that next year when we're putting together that plan, we need to consider from where they left off to, because each third level math teacher is not gonna reach the same goal every year, right? So it's not a uniform. So that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, and you're going to have a great opportunity in February. There's going to be a work session in which there will be 3 or 4 different school teams that are invited to, kind of walk the board through the process that they use, and then you can really kind of dive into those questions with the teams to kind of get an inside look on what it looks like in each of the buildings.
I really appreciate if we can get that data beforehand so that when they come, we have questions.
Okay.
No,
Great.
if I may, I appreciate Director Farah. The first thing I thought about is when you championing Goal 2.
Right.
Communication to our families is one of those areas of the school improvement plan. And, for some of our Title I schools, that's a requirement.
Right.
And as you know, with all the languages spoken in the home, it is a requirement for us to communicate so that they understand not only what the school improvement plan is, but also how are we doing? How are we doing as a school? And this process today that I appreciate is that how are we doing as a system to help support the schools to be able to support the students? And so look forward to that. And I think what I heard, Mr. Heath, is potentially the school improvement plans that are going to be presented, that you get them ahead of time.
Right.
So that you can take a look at that and then perhaps maybe have questions before then, but excited about that process. Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead and move to
Goal 2.
Goal 2. For this one, for the board, recall that we did go a little deeper in it, but we did want Ms. Simone Hamilton just to share a little bit more, just to bring you back up to speed on what you saw there as we move into Goal 3. So, Ms. Simone, I believe you are on, is that correct?
Yeah, I saw.
If not, then we can,
Oh, it says she's trying, Mike's not.
oh, she's trying, okay. We can come back to 2.
Looks like she's signed off and signing back on, so maybe
Okay.
you want to go.
We can come back to it.
Yep. Yeah, we can come back to let's go to Goal 3 then, if we might, just go out of order. So I'll have Dr. Behringer come up and start with Goal 3. If you mind just shifting over to that, we'll come back to Goal 2. Dr. Behringer.
Thank you, Vice President Beno, members of the board, Superintendent Vella, Ms. Santello. All right, Goal 3. This will be very familiar to you, considering we had some conversations about 40 minutes ago. So we'll take you through Goal 3 a little bit. You'll see some things that you've probably heard about previously. So Goal 3 really is about creating effective organizational systems. In this particular space, we're going to be talking about equitable systems and environments. So we're thinking about our facilities, our schools, and those spaces. So performance indicators, so we're talking about, this is basically a definition that Spencer's already defined all of these pieces, so I won't go back and define these pieces, I'll get to the heart of that. Performance indicator for this particular goal is around maintaining optimum program capacity, which was the choice for 2 of you as your number 1, which obviously we know goes deep into what does that mean and how does that have an impact on the other goals. And we know that maintaining optimum program capacity does have an impact on our other goals. So when we think about this, we think about, and I've shared this in our previous conversations around the boundary, functional capacity and program capacity. So we know that we have, our functional capacity is driven by the CBA language. So our KEA contract speaks to class sizes and caseloads. That then drives how many students safely can be in classrooms at various grade levels and grade bands. Then we have our program capacity, because our programs also were spoken to in our CBAs around our special programs that have a specific capacity based on the students and the programs that are being served in those spaces. And so this really talks about how do we maintain capacity not only in each of our buildings, but our classrooms as appropriate per program. So we've used several pieces. We've actually shared through either the boundary work or our bond work about the state study and survey. So looking at that, we have our internal functional capacity walkthroughs that we did of every single building, every single space in those buildings. And then, of course, our programs, when we had program conversations around current program state, but then also the idea of increasing our program access in some of our buildings to make sure that our students can access programs either in their home school or in the feeder pattern within their homeschool lies. So progress indicator. So part of that is our capital facilities plan. So our capital facilities plan is something we do every single year, but it is a 6-year plan. And so we're constantly updating and working through that to identify our gaps and our needs. And so we're looking at enrollment every single year in our school. We're looking at the permitting and the building and the spaces around those schools. So we're addressing those things. And again, that plan really focuses on not only the changes that are happening that'll increase the number of students that may be accessing that building, but then also whether or not our building is continuing to be safe. You've seen that in a previous presentation in the boundary work, or in the bond work, where we had that graphic that showed you each of the schools, and they had the circles or the triangles, and they had different colors based on the safety and things like that. So that's a big piece of that. Well-maintained, modernized school facilities with reliable technology infrastructure, which is something that was brought up by our tech guru, Mr. Director Clark over there, about that's important. The infrastructure for technology is important because that is the modern classroom, and that is the expectation. So very, very important. So, and all of this is stuff that is part of the bond work that we're doing. Okay, talked about that a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the baseline. Currently, right now in 2022, we're well aware of our student enrollment and what that's been doing for the last few years. Currently, right now, we've got about 38% of our schools, of our 43 schools, are in the optimal range for capacity. Obviously, that's not where we want to be. That's why this is a baseline. And so the work that we are doing, not only through the boundary work, but also through the bond work, will help to get this percentage in a much better place. Some additional information for you to know. Capital projects, we've got 420 active capital projects right now. 55% of those projects are completed. Then, of course, we've already shared the enormous amount of portable buildings that we have in our district at 172, which accounts for 12% of our actual classroom spaces in the entire district. So you take bricks and mortar classrooms and portables, portables are 12% of that space, which is huge. So we've shared through our boundary work that our focus and our goal is 80% capacity, which leaves us some flexibility in those spaces, because the last thing we want is to say, well, we have functional capacity of 1,200 kids to go to Mill Creek, and we say, well, let's stick 1,200 kids in there. No, we don't want to do that, because that brings a whole nother slew of issues and problems that create a challenge for not only the kids but the staff as well. So really trying to focus on that 80% capacity, which includes our programs. So that way we have that space, because we know that families are going to be moving into the area and that we want them to be able to access their neighborhood schools. And we also know that some schools are going to grow and are going to increase and decrease in enrollment greater than others because of their location. And so we wanted to be able to keep that in a space that we can still support our transfer process, as well as families moving into the area, things like that. Decreasing the portables, we've talked about that. That is an absolute an area of focus, which will support our goal. And then our geographic location, so talking about programming, which I just mentioned a little bit earlier about, ensuring that we have program access to our kids in the area that they reside in, if not in their home school, in a very near school to them, so we're not busing our fragile students across the district to access programming. So that's an important piece. And then, similarly, we've shared these pieces before in different platforms, but equity of student access and positive opportunities, that says a lot about what is that facility? What are we doing to create a facility where kids feel like they can really learn well in that space? Distributing resources, based on student needs is really important. So looking at all of our schools and making sure that they have everything they need and access to resources to provide those high quality experiences. And then, of course, our schools. We're going out for a bond because all of our schools need upgrades and need improvements, so all students can walk into their building and be proud of the space that they learn in every single day. So a quick little timeline here. We've got our capital facility plan, which is really the work, the implementation pieces that we do. I'm going to get everything on here. Pluses, equal signs, everything. Going across the top gives you a little timeline of how we work through that capital facilities plan every single year. And then, of course, our capacity work, because we're constantly, and we be even more intentional now that we've gone through this boundary process, is that we're in this space of checking our enrollment. We're looking at permits. We're looking at growth and development. We're going back to our facility assessments. We're in buildings and accessing the information firsthand in those spaces. We're going out and making sure that our schools are equipped to be able to support the programs in the way that they're designed to be delivered in those spaces. And so the work on the bottom there, maintaining that program capacity, is not done just entirely within the strategic initiatives operations team. It's really a partnership with our finance team as well as our HR team, as well as teaching and learning and schools and academic support, because those pieces there, when we're thinking about kids and programs and spaces, we're thinking about funding, we're thinking about staffing, we're thinking about enrollment projections, all those pieces are really important. And so you can see the soft targets down there in the corner. Our goal would be to reduce our portable usage right off the bat by 50%.
Wow.
Okay?
And when you say year, 2022 or school year?
23, 24?
23, 24. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not now, because we don't have any place to put the kids right now. We got to make some.
You're good.
Yeah,
I know.
we got to make some adjustments.
I'm like, wait a minute.
We haven't even gotten into this.
I know.
Director Farah,
So we're just getting warmed up.
I have a great team, but
You know, I'm just saying.
Appreciate the high expectations. Permits, being really intentional about our permit process and tracking those permits, and then, of course, charting the projects that are underway. I spoke about the large, robust bond and levy capital measure website that will be tracking all of these things, so people will see how things are going based on the timelines that we've created, so they can see how the money is being spent, how the work is getting done, pictures and all that kind of stuff. So I believe that is it.
That's it.
Any questions? Yeah.
Two questions. First, 50% reduction in portable usage, great, first year. What's the plan for years after that? And is there a plan for, I assume that there is a certain amount of portables within our district that it's actually optimal to have them in a portable for some reason. But 5%, 10%, so let's assume it's a 10% number. What's the plan for the other 40%?
Yeah, great question, Director Margell. And I would say that that's all going to be dependent on who all shows up to school next year in the 23-24 school year, but also the needs of those schools. And so I've been at several elementary schools where I walked in and talked to a teacher that's been in a portable for 15 years, and it's like, don't even think about putting me in a bricks and mortar school. And then trying to get people to understand, because that's their space. I mean, that's their classroom, much like people in the bricks and mortar classroom, like, don't even think about putting me in a portable. And so we've got to think about, one, we're thinking about our kids, and we're thinking about equity, and we're thinking about equitable spaces. Now, granted, it might be a struggle for some of those teachers who really love the space that they've made their own, and I'm not going to say that they don't have an amazing learning environment in that particular space, but it's different. And so that conversation and communication will be important as we go into those spaces, because that will happen going into the next school year. And so then as we start thinking about, okay, so if we get to 50%, how do we get to the rest of them? There is a need for portables in schools. And when I say that, I'm not saying there's a need for students to be in portables at schools, but there is a need for portables, because one thing that we're also doing is you'll hear from, and we've heard from Randy and his team, is that we have an increased need for mental health supports. Outside organizations, our CBOs and our partners, they need spaces, because right now they might be in buildings, in bricks and mortar offices or bricks and mortar classrooms, that we need classes to go in there, and we may need spaces for offices in a portable setting. One of the other things that I've noticed, and you probably noticed this too if you've gone through elementary schools, there's a need for storage. Storage in every single, multi-purpose area as you walk through, and not that big multi-purpose rooms, but when you go into those pods and the classrooms branch off from there, there's stacks of file cabinets and furniture and you name it. So there's a lot of need for storage. So they could be used for that, but not for classrooms. And so I see that transition happening, and I see it happening over a handful of years, because we also have to recognize that there will be an ebb and flow with enrollment. And if we happen to have portables on a site and we're not able to, because what we don't want to do is get ourselves to a point where we're turning away people that have moved into the neighborhood and we say, you can't go to the school across the street from your house. Right. So that's part of our responsibility in the operations team, is to constantly monitor the enrollment and the capacity, so we can make those slight adjustments. As I mentioned earlier in the boundary work, this isn't going to be like we're not waiting 10 more years to do boundary work. We will make adjustments every year if we need to, slight adjustments, or every 2 or 3 years, slight adjustments to maintain this 80% capacity threshold that is our goal. And that's important. So it may mean that some years we continue to drop down in portable usage, but there might be a year like, oh my gosh, we got to use the portable at this school that's still on their site for this classroom, until we can adjust the capacity by adjusting the boundaries the following year, things like that.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you.
Yeah.
My second question, I guess, is more of a comment. In reading the goal 3, maintaining optimum program capacity, a lot of this is centered around school capacity, and part of our schools are our programs. What I didn't see, and I guess it surprised me a little bit in this goal, is are we getting the right kids into the right programs? And I know this is something that we've talked about. We've had several people come from the community talking about high cap and some of the barriers of getting kids into these programs. And while where a program is located is definitely part of that, we know it's a much bigger issue than that. And I just don't see that included in here at all. And so I just, I guess this is more of a comment of, that would seem to me be part of optimum program capacity.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And I would say that I don't know if I have a complete answer for you at this time, but what I would say is this, thinking back to the actual goal itself, which is the creating of the organizational systems. So in this particular space, getting down into the facility piece, it might fit. I'm not going to say it doesn't. It might fit inside of that somewhere. It might also fit in goal number 1, in and around the graduation piece. But drilling down into that, it really is about academics and making sure our students have access to high quality academics, which may be part of that. It could also fit into 2, the sense of belonging, and making sure that we create spaces for students to feel like they belong, and which could be a programmatic piece. Mm-hmm. So it might live in multiple places, not to say that it won't be addressed in 3. I'm just saying that, yeah, it's not called out specifically in there, but it is recognized, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Mm-hmm. Great conversation. It's probably time to move to goal 2, if we can get Simone back into the mix here, and then move to goal 4.
Yeah, Dr. Anand, we're gonna move to goal 4 first, and then we'll have goal 2. We'll finish up with goal 2. So I'd like to invite Mr.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice President Bento, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Human Resources. I get to talk about the fun stuff. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our Assistant Director, who's in the audience, Irene Aguilar, who spearheads our effort around recruitment, retention, and workforce development, and she does a phenomenal job, and certainly will be on hand to answer any questions. So strategic goals for goal 4 and the superintendent goals. Develop and retain a diverse and premier workforce, right, is the strategic goal. And then diverse workforce development is the goal of of the system and our superintendent. Performance indicators in terms of measuring implementation and impact of both the developing and retaining a diverse work and premier workforce, and then the diverse workforce development. Maintain HR practices in support of employees' career at KSD. Since coming on board in July, my primary focus has been, 1, establishing relationships. So I'm out there in the buildings asking questions, bringing it back so that Irene and I can discuss what I'm hearing and actually taking members of the HR team. I think it's important that we hear what individuals are sharing so that we can incorporate that into our overall plan. I look forward, Vice President Bento, to coming out to Renton in terms of that teacher prep program and learning more about what you guys are doing with Grow Your Own. I mean, that is certainly something near and dear to my heart. So look forward to more collaboration and communication around that.
I know a person, so yes.
Awesome.
I'm happy.
There's the indicators. There are 16 existing indicators to measure goal for. The current resources that we are using are the staff survey data. And again, I'm learning and getting brought up to speed on that. The retention dashboard, really interested in terms of why how we're retaining our employees and why are they leaving, right? Really interested in understanding and knowing that. And then the Moss Adams report that was conducted.
Quick question.
Yes.
What are those 16 indicators? Do you have them listed somewhere?
That is a good question. I'm not sure where those 16 indicators are, but I certainly will find out.
They're currently in our strategic plan.
Okay.
So if you look at our blueprint, our strategic plan, that's
Right.
where all those indicators come from.
Yeah.
We've condensed those and wanted to make sure the board knew where they were, and these are the ones we're focusing on over here today. Thank you.
Thank you, President Vela. Progress indicator measures implementation with fidelity. Recruitment and retention planning, you'll see that in the timeline. Both myself and Irene are partnering with other stakeholders and constituents in terms of the development of this recruitment plan. So more to come in terms of sharing that with the board. Guiding belief and theory of action, right? Recruiting and hiring diverse teacher role models have proven to improve the performance and motivation of students. So really focusing, as I share with you, I meet with Irene every week. We talk about the strategies, especially post-COVID. What are the best strategies to go out there and recruit, right? More to come. You'll see more further in the presentation. Again, implementation with fidelity, create opportunities for diverse and qualified candidates to apply for employment within the KSD. So being strategic about the colleges, the universities. We sent out flyers regarding all of our postings to residents of the Covington and the Kent School District. We're starting to get a flood of interest, and now the capacity for HR to onboard the individuals who have expressed interest in joining the Kent family is our next challenge. Baseline performance indicator data. We currently have a retention rate as of last year of 83%. Our goal is to be higher than that in the 90s. Again, but looking at the factors that contributed to employee satisfaction, why individuals are leaving, why individuals are staying, conversations that we are having as an HR team. Recruitment visit, last year we did 14, 3 in person. The rest were virtual. I know in the conversations that I've had with Irene, we're talking about increasing those visits in person. I think the majority of the recruitment visits are going to be in person this year as universities and colleges are transitioning back to in person. But really being strategic about, where are those teachers that represent the demographics that we serve every day? Where are the paraeducators, right, that represent the demographics that we serve every day, and being strategic about, making sure that those locations end up on our recruitment and retention plan. Vacancy rate, 13%, 48 certificated positions. Current, we're working hard to fill each and every position. It is an opportunity for us in terms of, looking at different ways, creative ways to fill those vacancies that are current. Attrition, 17%, 587 out of 3,535, and that was from last year. equitable outreach, meeting candidates where they are, going into the community. I shared the strategy behind sending out the flyers in terms of our current vacancies. Great response from that. Also getting out in classrooms, visiting, talking to our high school seniors about the opportunities, wonderful, great opportunities that there are in education. Talking to the system about creating classes that focus on, developing educators. So more to come on that. Growing your own, I just kind of mentioned what we're doing with that. Exit stay interviews, critical, right? Again, I stated earlier that we need to understand why people are leaving and, adjust accordingly in terms of how we are supporting our staff.
If I can.
Yes.
Right, this is directed to the superintendent. So we've had a discussion up here before about needing to look at where the candidates come from that become educators. And the following things are true. One, unfortunately, between the pandemic and other circumstances, the number of students that dropped out of the community college system is stunning. Number two, the ongoing struggle of a lack of candidates in the field of education has drowned us over the years. My favorite, school psychologists, because we're still using agency school psychologists. There simply are not enough available on the market. It's not us, it's everybody. But the point being is being the 5th largest school district in the state and preparing people to go on for further education, whether we are being specific enough and developing a strategy that encourages the young to take the gamble of making that as a choice of career preparation. And that's not going to go away. That's going to be with us. And
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Director Clark, and for our board. Recruitment, I think in my experience has been, what are districts doing where are they going, who are they getting, and are they staying? And I've been in this boardroom where I've seen those presentations done yearly. Recruitment now needs to expand to not just colleges and universities. Right. It now needs to move in, and it has in many districts, move into what are our students' careers. You heard Vice President Beno talk about CTE and career paths. We need to look at recruitment in a broader sense and be thinking about a strategy or strategies that we can go out into those high schools, not only ours, but others, and how do we message that so that we can guide them to a career in education. In addition, back to the psychologists and other support personnel, ESAs, we need to also look at how might we work with universities in partnering with them in including more of those types of programs. Example, Representative Orwell working with our students in looking at growing the mental health supports for high schools, as well as growing social workers. So universities can begin to work with social workers and by the way, we're entering that partnership with the University of Washington so that we can continue that type of recruitment. So in a nutshell, it's broader range of looking at recruitment, not just how we used to do that. So thank you.
And to add to that, Director Clark, again, those are the conversations that we are engaged in every day. in terms of how are we going to do this differently? How are we going to take a different approach, and especially around the grow your own? You know, I'm big on, hey, I can't just sit in my office and wait for things to happen. I need to be out talking to folks. I need to be out in the buildings talking to our students and sharing with them all the great opportunities that education has to offer. So that, I mean, we're talking about it, again, more to come once we finalize and you know, get our plan up and going.
I just want to ask you a quick question. What is the time period of onboarding?
What is the time
What
period?
is the time? How long does it take to onboard a new recruit?
Irene, you want to answer?
Yeah, if we could have Ms. Aguilar come on up to the, yeah, and I just wanted to add before Ms. Aguilar comes up.
Right.
Remember, onboarding is all year long.
Right.
Because we hire all year long. It's not just in the summer to start the fall.
True.
It depends on when that attrition you saw.
Exactly.
We're onboarding all year long, and I'm sure you're going to hear a little bit more from Ms. Aguilar.
So, good evening, Vice President Mr. Bento, Superintendent Mr. Vela, and members of the board. Hello. So onboarding, so for example, when an employee gets hired,
Right.
They have to do all of their paperwork and go through all of that process. So that looks like about a week, because once we actually get the document that says that they can go ahead and be hired, then
Right.
the process starts right away, where it's bouncing back and forth between our employment support team and our operations team to get them all done. So that includes completing their I-9 badge, fingerprint. So that normally looks like about a week.
Okay.
And then within the first 30 days, they are invited to new employee orientation as well. So it moves really rapidly. I think there are sometimes things that are delayed. For example, if they have to order like a social security card, or, you know, some of the documents are not ready.
Right,
But yeah, normally like about a week, and then they get the new employee orientation within the 30 days.
So within that week, after they've completed that, do they go into the classroom?
Yeah, once they have completed like the
Boom.
I-9 piece
Right.
of it, then we give the okay for them to start. It just depends on the hiring administrator when they're ready to start.
Okay.
So yeah, on our side, we give them the okay,
Right.
and then depending on what the hire date is.
Right.
Or when the administrator has them ready to start, then
Thank you.
they're ready to, at least from our side, they're ready to go.
From our side, it's done, that person is complete, so they can go ahead and go into the
Right.
classroom.
Yes.
I just wanted to also, Mr. Harvey,
Yes, sir.
what I wanted to say is, let's cast our, I don't want to say, maybe insensitive, but let's expand our reach, not to only Washington State,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So,
indeed.
so that the intentionality you talked about
Yes, indeed.
really is approach that, so that we're not only limiting ourselves into the schools of the state of Washington, we're reaching out the whole country.
Director Farrell, yeah, that is certainly something that we discuss, myself and Irene, each and every day in terms of going back to what I stated earlier, being strategic
Right.
in terms of where we go. For example, Heritage College on the other side of the mountains, right, because of the high Hispanic population, and so we are talking about being strategic about where we go. Any other questions regarding the recruitment piece before I go into timeline and benchmarks? So the recruitment and retention plan, as I stated, we are currently partnering with our labor partners and labor teams in terms of collaborate with us regarding our recruitment efforts, to include going on visits with us, having that teacher representation. Also, para-educator representation is critical for us. Then also identifying and signing up, as we discussed, for career fairs. Staff allocation review, right? We're starting that process, already having the conversation with that. And that's the top part. The most important piece in terms of the the HR practices for KSD Career is the reaching out, as we discussed, to various, not only universities, but our classrooms, right? Really making a concerted effort to broaden our horizon in terms of who we're talking to. The EOY soft targets, implement new stay and exit interview software. Big on that. Again, as I stated earlier, we have to know why our individuals aren't satisfied with the Kent School District, and why are individuals satisfied and why are they staying. Critical for us. Increase college and university MOUs, and again, that's that partnership and collaboration with our colleges and universities. Let's see, develop and retain a diverse, we've gone over this, you've seen this. The progress indicator is recruitment and retention plan. The performance indicator is maintain HR practices in support of employees' career in KSD.
Mr. Turner, if you'll back up to the last slide there, we're going to move into Goal 2 to finish off tonight.
Okay.
But I wanted you to complete Goal 4 and then any other questions you might have.
So with that, I'll turn it over to any other questions that the board may have of me at this time.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I know that Seattle does I'm sure the superintendent knows that Seattle Teacher Residency Program, where people can apply and get a degree in special education and another thing, and they get a $20,000 living stipend, and then they have to make a commitment to the district for 5 years, et cetera. So I'm kind of curious if we've thought about doing it, and they partner with University of Washington as well. So I was just wondering if that's something we've looked at here.
Yeah, it's one, going back into our Moss Adams review and other ideas that come out, that's something that was asked questions at. What are those residency type programs that we can do? So that's certainly one. The other one that I was thinking about is specially endorsed areas. You saw up there on the timeline, dual language for a multilingual. You saw special education and others. We work closely with universities to offer endorsements, and we pay for those endorsements. The example most recently, and I believe, Ms. Aguilar, we do support ELL or multilingual endorsements with universities. I know there was a time we were looking at for dual endorsements, both special education and multilingual ed, because that is what is really needed moving forward, especially in our demographics. But yeah, we're doing this. That's a great program. It does two things. One, that program, it gives the next level of a teacher who wants to provide support for those who want to be a part of that, in addition to getting more teachers in the program. So it's a good one that my team will be looking into.
Thank you so much.
It's for clarify some of that, when you talk about some of the areas that are of particular need, do we have particular goals around those ones as opposed to the all up? Some of the ones, and I know that there's 16, and you can, thank you for not giving a slide with all 16 goals on them, right? But like the vacancy rate, 13% of certificated positions, that's a very high up number. Obviously, we're also interested in things like our paras and then also, but special ed paras. So I know it made me think about the SIT plans, right? A school looks at the area that like most needs to move. Have we looked at our areas that are most needing, and are there goals specifically around those ones?
So one of the things that I have shared with Mr. Hunter is when we were talking about just the baseline numbers, is that the status quo has not applied to recruiting for the past 3 years, just because of COVID. So, for example, like last year when we had started recruiting, we had a travel ban, so we weren't able to travel outside of the state to some of the questions. In the past also, we had not had, such a high number of need for paras. Normally, we were okay with those numbers, so that is part of the data that we had not collected in the past that we started collecting this year to be able to track it. And that happens we have our team, listening more than anything, what is the need? That's why the flyers were specifically on one side for special education paras that we were looking for, and then the transportation, and then just all of our positions. So there are things that are, we're listening and we're acting upon it. So we are collecting data just on special education with the flyers, where we're seeing that the number of applications are starting to increase, because even just the new employee orientation that I did today, there were a couple of new paras that shared, I heard the need, and I wasn't doing anything at home, so here I am. So we have been seeing just some action on that. So we're learning on our side too, just to start capturing some of that data to be able to prepare better for the following year, to the point of we are going out of state. Last year we did virtual recruitments out of state, but yeah, definitely hoping to get more of that. And then on the timeline for our SPED, our SLPs, and those, we open up pool positions so that when we are recruiting, we actually take some of our colleagues from other communities with us so that we can do interviews on the spot. So as we're getting those resumes in, that we see that they have that endorsement that we know we're gonna need, if they see that they have the qualifications, they get interviews on the spot there so that we can try to capture them in March, to get them so that we can have them available again. Not everyone, stays, because they're at that point, they're still going to different career fairs, but we're definitely out there trying.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have a little bit of change. We're going to go ahead and move forward to goal 2. We still have some technical difficulties, but Mr. Pan's going to go ahead and cover Ms. Hamilton's portion. So, Mr. Pan. And just as a reminder, you saw this before, but we wanted the board to see the baseline KPI data that we have and some of the plans and the timeline that we have. So, Mr. Pan.
Thank you. And I did want to highlight as well that none of these goals and the activities within them are solely the responsibility of any one team, right? So a lot of what my HR colleagues shared, we're all involved, and we all have responsibilities and accountability around hiring, recruitment, and retention. And so I think that's important to highlight here. And I'm going to model this as well, because this is, again, something you've heard and had presented in a perhaps much better way by Ms. Simone Hamilton, and I will do my best to do so in her stead. So the content is the same. What I'm going to highlight for you is one of the pieces that you pointed out was the need for baseline data. And so while we kept that same framework for the presentation, we recognized that it might be an opportune time for us to go back and make sure that there were also the same data representations for what was previously shared. So that's really what you see here. And that's what is different. And I'm not going to go through all the other content that you've already seen previously. So with this is you'll see the same color coding, right, around the performance indicator baseline and that response rate that is presently on screen. This is from the survey information from last year. And that's the equity survey for K-12 and the response rate we had. And so one of the things we want to see, right, the data itself just gives us an indicator. We, as an organization, as a school board, there's a selection of, are we trying to have that number go up, go down, or be maintained? Right? And so, one of these things is this a appropriate response rate that we want? Do we want that response rate higher? Do we want that response rate lower? Do we want that response rate within a certain range? So that is, though, the baseline that we're starting from. And you'll see similarly in terms of these metrics for school belonging based on that student equity survey for grades 6-12. you have these percentages. They give you a sense of, do we want that number or that percentage higher or lower or maintained? And I think that's the type of question, that's the type of thinking that we're engaging in when we're looking at these baseline indicators. Because in the activities we engage in, we say, we'll know the success of those activities by whether they move these numbers, right, through the activities we engage in, the strategies that we employ, towards what we hope to achieve. One of the other, you'll see like one of these things that we think will help guide as an indicator towards that ultimate performance baseline, right, that key performance indicator, is this school design team. So you'll see on this timeline from before, and I don't seem to be able to increment at the moment, but on the timeline you'll see that one of the things shared previously was a desire to have 80% as that number right there, right, in terms of school design teams in place in schools. And right now, what's being responded here is 9.5. And so, those give us some things that we can seek to aspire for, and then we can look back when we get to that interval that we are using. So for the end of this year, for example, and say, did we successfully meet that metric and that desire? And if so, that's great. If not, why not? So, any other questions?
I wanted to share, Ms. Hamilton really wanted to share, she had listening sessions, student listening sessions, Kent Ridge and I believe it was KM. Yes, Kent Ridge and KM went fantastic. So we're well on our way with doing what we said we would do related to the timeline and really getting student input. The other piece was made the connection from today. What could our students tell us about their needs of the bond coming up in terms of learning environment? What can they tell us about what they might see as a direction we might go? And so I just wanted to share that. Ms. Hamilton shared it with me. I'm like, I'll let the board know. So, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the other ones that she's been working on is that those indicators at the very bottom from the current belonging survey, up in the top left are some of the things that she's aiming at and working at revising that survey to get a little closer to what students say that they really need in school. So she's continuing to refine her work by listening to kids.
So more to come on that as we move forward to our mid-years. So, all right. Dr. Nyland, now we'll turn it back over to you to close us off for the evening.
All right. We can skip almost to the end. And how are we doing for time? Do we have
doing
time
great.
for a little bit more interaction, or are we?
We are good, 20 minutes.
Okay. So, school board, you've been provided with great reading material that came from Sandy Hayes about a research article on what it takes to have school board and school governance make a difference for kids in the classroom. So I'm going to give you this slide right here is kind of our thumbnail sketch of where we're going now. So I think we've covered the reports on our remaining goals. We'll do a progress review on January 18th. Sounds like the school improvement plans will be coming in February. Progress review in March. Somewhere in there, we'll work on setting goals for next year a little earlier than we did this year so that that can feed into the school improvement planning process and then completing the final evaluation by June 30th. So that's kind of where we're going through the rest of the year. And then the last slide, well, next slide, I guess. I think it's the last one. Or one more? And one more after that. There we go. So we've been talking about the arrows and how do we get our arrows all lined up. So I think you're getting a good feel for that as we've gone through this process, how your work impacts the superintendent, how it impacts executive cabinet, how it impacts the schools, with Simone Hamilton's work, how that impacts students and student agency. So we're weaving all of our arrows together and getting kind of building momentum as everybody works together to get there. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes here to take any feedback from your article. So what was your takeaway from the articles about, supposed to be 2 columns here, what would we see school board directors doing to support collaboration and success of each goal? And what would we see the superintendent and executive cabinet and schools doing to achieve that? Again, this part is one that I'd love to be present with you and having that engaging conversation like you did on Friday. So particularly the article, second article on effective school boards and how it makes a difference for student learning. Any takeaways from that in terms of the role of school boards?
Well, again, I mean, communication is fundamental. I mean, collaboration is about basically tracking and agreeing to what it is we're working on, and whether in fact, you know, are we reviewing, is it correctable? You know, what are the responses, obviously, from the public? These things are all part of any strategic plan. I mean,
Thank you.
I was going to say something similar, because on a day-to-day basis, I don't think any parent in this district really cares about me, like as a school board director. They don't. Like, they care about their school, and they care about their child, and the school that their child attends. And so ultimately, as I look at collaboration as a role as a school board director, our job is to make sure that our plan, our strategic plan, our blueprint, et cetera, is thus that parents really feel what our vision is, and they feel that in their schools, in their communities, and that we do a good job supporting the work of our staff here to make sure that those get implemented. That's how I see, and that's basically what I got from the article is, ultimately, it's, no one cares about me, and that's okay, because it's not about me. We want to make sure our students get what they need, and that the families and communities see that in the schools. And so that's kind of my take on this, that section of the article. I think it was on the second or third page. That's why I really connected with.
Interesting. And I guess I took it a little bit different. While I very much do not know, the teacher in the classroom is way more important to a parent and the success of their student any day of the week. I think it goes back to, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yep.
And so the strategic direction of the board and the clarity of that and the communication and collaboration of that is increasingly quantitatively obvious and important. And so I guess that's what I would take away from it. If it's been a little bit since I looked at it, but that's my high level takeaway is, you know, the strategic direction and plan of a district is important, which I kind of wanted to say a little no duh on that one, but it's good to see that. I mean, that's in anything, right? If you don't have a good plan, you're not going to go anywhere. So, you know, just making sure that I liked showing how it's more than just it seems obvious, but looking at the quantitative numbers all around it.
I just wanted to add, I mean, right, a strategic plan, all of that to follow is very important, and I agree with that, but also what we say, how we say it, and how do we treat each other amongst us trickles down to the classroom. So, you know, so for me, that is what I took away from how do we make sure that we show that sense of that we're together on this, and that the teacher who's teaching in that classroom knows that we have your back and we're thinking about you, or we're thinking about the students. So all of that is what I got out of the article.
Dr. Lyon, if I may, just from our team's perspective, and just going through this process, which started last June, as you recall. And I know my team has shared with you today the focus areas that we agreed upon. So we are modeling that collaboration that would happen in a school, as Vice President Beno knows, as being part of the school improvement team within a school. That's what it takes. How do we work together on identified goal areas, in particular, those targeted areas that we want to work together, and how are we going to monitor the progress, and how are we going to champion, as you heard Dr. Nyland say today, how will we champion parts of it? Because it's hard work. What our teachers and support staff do every day is hard work. And it's a lot easier when we're working together on a common focus. And this process, and I know Dr. Nyland will kind of finish with this, it's important that we align ourselves, those arrows he talks about, the braiding piece. Systems support is critical. And I appreciate Vice President Beno, our role as a board from that article, and how we work together with superintendents and his or her team is so critical, because that's where the braiding needs to take place. We listen to each other, we listen to our community and our students, even more so, and that's a goal now. And so just wanted to thank our board for engaging today. And Dr. Nyland, sorry, I didn't mean to steal any thunder, but I'll turn it back over to you.
No, it's perfect because it fits on kind of the left side of the column. I do have the feedback from President Hamada here, and she says championing the goal, the ones that we picked particularly. She says being prepared, so look at the quarterly reviews and really dig into those, following the chain of command, if at all possible. Being available, listening to community needs, listening to student needs, what Superintendent Bella just mentioned. And then working on the messaging to communicate the goals. So appreciate the continued work by the board and by superintendent and executive cabinet to really braid and weave those goals together to do good things for kids in Kent School District. So thanks for the opportunity to participate with you tonight. Thanks for doing your homework, and thanks for stepping up to champion one or two of those goals. So have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nyland.
Does anybody have any questions or anything further? We can be done early. It's 7:20. I'm going to adjourn our special meeting.